welcome everyone and good afternoon. Thanks for joining us on the latest instalment of Engineering Insights here, our webinar series from Burns Sheehan. I'm Simon Evans. I head up the software engineering function here at Burns Sheehan, and today I'm delighted to have Stefania Chaplin, who is a solutions architect at Secure Code Warrior, will be entering into the security world for us. I believe the title of the talk is From Dev to DevSec, Why Security-Aware Developers Are the New Security Rockstars. Over to you, Stefania.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Simon. And thank you everyone for attending. Let me just share my screen. So hopefully in a second you should see it. If not, let me know. But yes, so today I'm going to be talking about Dev to DevSec, why security-aware developers are the new rockstars. So I've got a couple of things to talk about. Who am I? Usually a good place to start. Talking a bit about, going back a bit of a history lesson, talking about software creation, Waterfall, moving to Agile and DevOps, and then the new methodology, DevSecOps. Security as a shared responsibility, which brings me nicely to ultimately why security-aware developers are the future. And then finally, some tips from transforming from Dev to DevSec, a tactical guide, and then some Q&A. What I'd say, if you do have questions, feel free to post them as you go along. I know Simon's going to be moderating the Q&A for me, but any questions about this or about DevSec or security, obviously feel free to shout out. So, who am I? I started off life as a developer. So originally I was a Java developer. I did quite a lot of Java, especially at uni, then a bit after. And then I moved into Python. So I've always been very back-end. I've never really done anything like JavaScript. I literally live in the terminal, the black and green screen. When I speak to my non-technical, friendship group, I say, in those movies where they've got the hackers and they're just typing stuff and that's great. Yeah, that's my happy place. So I worked in development for a while. Then I moved into the security space. So looking specifically at open source. I was working for a company called Sonatype, and they do software composition analysis. So anyone in the room who might do any Java, you probably are getting anything in your pom.xml is going to be coming from Maven Central. So Sonatype own Maven. And then if there are any vulnerabilities, in any of your open source, for example, what happened with Equifax, the struts vulnerability or anything else within any of the open source environments. That was kind of my background, and it is quite scary how much of an application is open source. But anyway, I'm not here to talk about that. And now I am Secure Code Warrior. So this is, whilst, like DevOps, I'm going to talk about this, is very much shift left. Secure Code Warrior is start left. Ultimately, that's actually the reason I joined, because I'm like, of course, what's better than shifting left? Let's start left. And I'm going to cover some of these concepts in my talk. So, the ancient history of software creation. Developers and AppSec teams through the ages. So we're not going to go too far back in time. For tech, 1986, that's ages. And this wasn't even tech. So W. Edward Deming wrote a book, Out of the Crisis, in 1986. And he was very, very famous for his work with manufacturing. So he was working with with the Japanese car makers and seeing why they were so good when you compared them to Fords. And one of the things that he really highlighted was the importance of quality. And you can easily translate quality in, manufacturing to security in tech. So he said, lots of things like, in terms of, the individual, you've got to check the quality of the individual parts, having standardization, stuff that now is just logical and of course, but it wasn't always at that point. And one of my favorite things he said is, quality is everyone's responsibility. And this translates so well to security. I've seen a lot of surveys, I think SNCC do one, and there are some other ones in the security tool space. And they ask, who is responsible for security? and the devs say security, security say devs, QA point at them both, and everyone's just pointing the finger. No one's really, well, people are taking ownership, but it's not about individuals. It's about, in everyone, or all the individuals. And what you ended up with is, and I'm sure a lot of people can relate on the call, is you end up with silos. So you've got your developers and you've got your security. And this is to the point that they even speak different languages. Developers will talk about constructors. They will talk about, frameworks and method classes and, all the funky things going on in their IDE. Security, that doesn't translate to them. They want to know about attack vectors, validated input, SQL injections, all of the security speak. So there's a real silo, both in, ultimately kind of language, KPIs, what's important. Developers need to get new features out the door. We want our new and shiny. Security's like, but it's not secure. Like they want not to be hacked. I suppose no one wants to be hacked, but it's a very kind of siloed environment. And part of the issue we have is the old bugs performing new tricks. So SQL injection, we talk about it a lot, especially injection A1 in the OWASP top 10. SQL injection has been around since 1998, so that's just over 20 years. And guess how long the fix has been available? You got it right. Pretty much 22 years. But the issue is it still keeps coming up in, SAST, in SAST scans, in pen tests, comes up in open source and software composition analysis. And it is as easy as, a parameterized query, let's not concatenate our variables, sounds easier. Like, okay, I understand why not, because you need to, sanitize your input. But it's amazing how often, these bugs, for example, cross-site scripting as well. I've read some stuff that, I have to check it, but, cross-site scripting is, there in almost 2/3 of websites, which is crazy when you think about it. I would have to double check that stat. I read it somewhere. I'm just going to say I read it on the internet, but anyway. And the issue is we can't afford to continue down this path. And it's scalability. So 111 billion lines of code is produced each year on average and needs to be secured. I obviously don't want to offend anyone. Part of the reason I moved from Java to Python is a lot less verbose. Because for me, the Java syntax kind of got to me. So anyway, this lines of code is across all languages, and that will vary massive. I'm sure somewhere, someone is still writing COBOL and Fortran because so much of it underpins our society. Zero-day cyber attacks are estimated to reach 1 per day by 2021. And this is a real problem because even if you look at Equifax, which was, now it was a while ago, it was maybe 3 years ago, and with Equifax, they didn't even realize they were breached. It was a 3-day, so not even a 0-day. They had 3 days to patch their version of struts. It took them about 3.5 months to even notice they'd been hacked, by which point a lot of damage had been done. And, there's stuff around GDPR, how much they would have been fined. They lost 1/3 of their market cap. So that's the thing. If big organizations, and I hope, things are definitely, I know things are improving, but the fact that 0-day attacks are going to be a thing, that means you need to be literally on it. And part of the problem, the demand for security personnel far outweighs supply and will only get worse. I've been in a variety of organizations, working my last few jobs, not working in loads of them, but anyway, and it always amazes me the range of how many developers to security. I'm going to come to that in a bit. So let's look at the methodology metamorphosis. There was Waterfall originally from about the 1970s, and this was the original. I say the original, this was one of the most famous originals. And on paper, yeah, okay, so start at the beginning, finish at the end, go from analysis all the way to kind of deployment and maintaining in production. But the issue with a waterfall is it doesn't, as a waterfall, does with gravity and everything, it flows down. If you're suddenly in implementation or testing and you realize that you need to change something, you've got to suddenly magically go up, make the water go uphill, which is not easy. And when I talk about it with my, like I said, my non-technical friendship group, I'm like, think about how there used to be Windows 95 or like Office 95, then 98, then 2000. And now we have 365 because it's constantly updating. And similarly, you know, if we were programming Windows, you know, and it was 1997 and we realized something was wrong, that would be a big ask to suddenly go back to the beginning and down. So it means you can't really make changes. And in today's world, the problem with Waterfall is by the time something's done, it can already be out of date or incorrect, or especially if you're working on a vendor side, like if you're making, say, websites, it might not be what your customer wants. So then we went to Agile. I quite like Agile because it's, you know, lots of little sprints. So it's like each individual feature. And the interesting thing about Agile, if anyone hasn't read the Agile Manifesto, it's like about 12 points. You can literally Google it. It's quite interesting because Agile has nothing to do with tech, really. It's about, these manifestos are about culture. So it's about, you know, people over processes. It's about, you know, communication. It's about, you know, finding out what kind of is wanted and then moving along with that, instead of, you know, people sometimes just think, oh yeah, Jira, Kanban boards. I'm like, that's a tool that helps with the methodology. And one of the great benefits of Agile is it means you can pivot quickly, and especially in the current world. Hey, if you told me a year ago, if you told me in January when I was booking all of my holidays for the year, which I think I'm now at 5, anyway, and you told me, oh yeah, they're all going to be cancelled because no one's going to be flying anywhere, who would have known? So anyway, at least with Agile methodologies, we can pivot. And then finally, I say finally, this is one of the more common ones that are thrown around. So DevOps. So Gene Kim wrote a book. It was actually, you know, a few years ago now. I think it was 2013, which feels like forever. If anyone hasn't read it, I would recommend it. Personally, I'm not much of a reader. I really like magazines, you know, scientific ones, obviously. But but with the Phoenix Project, it's a book written from the perspective of someone in IT ops, and it's basically everything that can go wrong, and basically DevOps saves the day. But it's a really interesting kind of perspective of how it all kind of works and puts together. And as the name suggests, you know, the concatenation of dev and ops, it's when development and operations work together. And it's like, oh yeah, why don't we have consistent environments between development, you know, UAT and production? Okay, we might not need as much compute in the first two as in what's in production, but hey, you know, having similar versions of things, having standardization instead of having these silos. Problem with DevOps is this magical thing, and you know, you talk about 10 releases a day or hundreds or maybe even thousands, you know, every line of code that's committed is suddenly in production. But what if this line of code is insecure? So you've got this magical magical unicorn, and you know, it's, you know, rainbows literally coming out. But the problem is security then have to tidy up these rainbows. So this was, I think it was Pete Cheslock in about 2014. He showed this at DevOps Days. And I think it kind of sums it up because, great, yeah, we're releasing every day. Oh, there's a vulnerability. You're exposing the whole database in plain text. Okay, and then we release the next day. You've still got that. And the next day. So you need to have a process to, you know, find these vulnerabilities, you know, fix them, you know, even just be aware of them, or like I like to say, hey, you know, why don't you, you know, train for them? In terms of, wouldn't it be great if developers knew how to hide plain text in the databases with all the credit card data? Obviously, that's a bit of a silly example because we hope they do, but it's these kind of like little things that really make a difference. So that's kind of where DevSecOps steps in. And DevSecOps isn't about putting like security right in the middle. It's about having security at every stage of the process. Because, you know, there's been so much research. One of my favorites is from IBM, and it says it's 100 times cheaper to fix a bug in production, in development, so when a developer is still coding, than in production. So, you know, for example, you know, once something is out in deployment, especially say, for example, if you're doing IoT, if there's physical hardware, or like with automotives, and we found out the entertainment system is hackable. Wouldn't it have been so much easier if we discovered that when we were still developing it, or maybe even in testing, or at any stage before, you know, deployment and production? And there's many, many tools that can, help with this. It's not just about layers and layers of testing. That doesn't always work. And you also need not only, testing in the code, but also looking in production. I've worked in a few places, and incident response teams are very, very valuable because a bit like Forrester said, all manual processes are doomed to fail. It's kind of the similar with, security and being hacked. I'm not going to say everyone will get hacked eventually, but there is a, statistically ... So it's not only about having these layers of testing, but also making sure that you're doing audits, logs, threat intelligence, etc. And like I said with the shifting left, it's a lot cheaper to fix stuff here. But imagine if we could, let's do some inception. Let's get into developer brains and train them on secure code so then they just write parameterized SQL queries. The dream. So then you end up with security, Nirvana, DevOps and Sec working together, multiple deployments, commercial team are happy, C-suite are happy, happy days. So, how is DevSecOps changing the game? A process that cannot be bought. Like I said, a lot of people, I'll come to what I was about to say in a minute. Where do vulnerabilities come from? So this is quite a logical, but I think interesting graph in terms of percentage of defects introduced is predominantly in coding. That's where the code is written, and vulnerabilities, not always, but they usually come from coding. I know there's loads and loads of other attack vectors, and you kind of have networking and infrastructure, etc. But fundamentally, I would say the bulk does come from coding. So maybe let's address that. Let's try and reduce the percentage of defects introduced. And where do we want to go? How about coding? So the secure software development lifecycle. So it's very similar to the last, to the DevSecOps I showed before. But before you even start developing, why don't you start training and also assessing your developers? It can be as simple as if, everyone who works in an organization, there's probably going to be a tier 1 application that fundamentally underpins the business. If I was going to take a trivial, if I'm thinking of Spotify, probably the app that people listen to their music on. If that goes down, they're going to be in a bit of trouble. So in that example, maybe we don't want to let every, just junior grad or every single developer or anyone into that area of the business. Maybe we want to just assess, see if they're not going to introduce new vulnerabilities. Maybe we do some training first. And that can be kind of translated to, multiple types of organizations, because in terms of when you shift left, it will reduce the cost of the vulnerability. So start left kind of even more. And you find this, this is a nice, pretty example, but you've got all your testing, SAST, IS, RAST, DAST, but these can be quite expensive because then you've got to go back and change the code. So you can, if you focus on developers, and our new security-aware developer Rockstars, this is where you can make some really good cost efficiencies. You can not only save money, but you can have happy developers. How great does that sound? And the thing about it, this is what I was going to say before, was changing culture is key. So it's not about let's get this tool or this test or this scan or let's do all these, let's buy all this tech. It's about the culture. So I talked about the development and security silos. Have people work together. You could even have a member of security in the planning process, talking about threat modeling, for example. And it's very much about culture will change values and attitudes, and then that will, change actions. And then it waters down, and it's best when it comes from a top-down approach. I'm sure different people can relate to working in organizations where the top-down culture really filters down, but it can also come from the middle layer as well. So anyone who's got, is responsible for developers or has a mentors or micro team, having a security positive attitude can really make such a difference to the culture and also the actions. And then you end up with a whole happy place where resolving security issues together. Because as I mentioned, and also as W. Edward Deering mentioned, security and quality is everyone's responsibility. So why security-aware developers are the future, the new kind of rockstar. So we've talked a bit about security and development, but there will never be enough AppSec people to save the day. So, there are organizations where it's 100 to 1. I've gone on site, well, when we could still, visit each other, but I've gone on site and I met a organization where it was 300 to 1. And then I was on a virtual web call a while ago and they had 2 to 150. I gave them a bit of round applause. I'm like, wow, 1 to 75. Oh, you're doing better than average. But if you think about all these developers writing this code, there's no way that one person can scale, like physically impossible, even if they were security superwoman or anything like that. So enter security champions. And these people, once you can identify them in the organization, they are great. They are usually either very passionate or also very paranoid about security. They will, be there in the front line. They can relate to their peers. They can translate the concept. They can normally speak the security jargon and the developer jargon. And these are going to be your front line, helping introduce, security kind of to the team, and getting these kind of principles in place. And you can't really, I suppose you can maybe hire with that specific title. I was going to say, you can't buy security champions. It does require a certain type of person, but you can definitely empower them and help them grow. And there are kind of many ways that you can kind of investigate these kind of programs. I can maybe cover it later if we've got time. So better than that, hey, why stop at security champions? So I've worked with organizations where it's, 1,000 devs, there's about 25 security champions. Okay, so that's still what, maths, like 1 to 40, give or take. Hey, why don't we empower all developers? Imagine if we could have all 1,000 developers with even just a basic, but with the knowledge of these security concepts, feeling empowered to write secure codes, all of a sudden they see their, all of the little red alerts from all of their, SAS, DAST, etc. tests, oh wow, I've only got 200 red dots instead of 700 like last year, because obviously after a certain point, those little red dots, that's just going to go straight in the delete file. No, didn't say that, I promise. But anyway, empowering developers to be security aware is a real win-win. They feel happy, there's progression opportunity, they're making right choices, less red dots, less build fails, and overall a more secure code base and organization. So, making the move from dev to DevSec. Transform with a tactical guide. So these are kind of a couple of top tips that can really help you. Like I say, security is a shared responsibility. And one of the ways you can do this is having cross-functional teams. So I think I touched on it, but having security as a voice, or just even invited to the meetings when, planning of new applications, how the different infrastructure is going to interact with each other. Having similar KPIs. In terms of, like I say, build fails, AppSec testing, etc. And having you can literally see by the image, like an arm in arm, instead of a finger pointing, oh, it was your fault, oh, you did this. Be like, okay, well, there's a bug. How do we fix it? How do we make sure it doesn't happen again? Happy to help, etc. And this is exactly it, nurturing a highly supportive environment. So there are other ways you can do this. For example, as I mentioned, incident response team. I'm not going to say they're literally hidden in a cupboard. It's like the bat phone. The minute there's a problem, they're all over everything. But giving them kind of a voice to, whether it's an email or a Slack channel, or giving them some priority in terms of, so people understand what they do, how they can make their job easier. It's all about, instead of having security as kind of the final step when you're submitting an application, like it's like, oh yeah, I'm about to deploy security, I've got some pen tests, I'm hoping I can get away with it. You don't want that. That unfortunately is the way the world is sometimes. But wouldn't it be better if, security and development can obviously work together in a supportive environment? And this is the thing, the best DevSecOps teams train constantly and improve their skills as they work. And the thing about developers, I can say, because I was one, we do like the new and shiny. There's always new things, coming out, whether it's frameworks, whether, the whole infrastructure as code movement, or moving into the cloud, or doing infrastructure as code in the cloud. There's so many things out there, and developers like learning. They tend to be very intelligent, very creative people. So if you give them the chance to train and to improve their skills, they'll normally take you up on it, because especially if you do the whole, well, I say carrot and stick, it's more of a carrot, but hey, if you do some security training, you're probably going to write more secure code and you're going to have less build fails. Like, to me, that's simple math, and that is good news. So giving them that opportunity, and that can be, there's obviously, traditional like class-based training doesn't always work so well. There's kind of more interactive training. You can do, defensive, kind of ethical hacking, more of a just making developers aware of what security, what it actually really means, instead of being the scary pen tester or security guy at the end of the app, empowering them to be able to, make these decisions and write the secure code. And this one is very pertinent. I do have a funny story, actually, but successful DevSecOps teams have the right suite of tools for the job at hand. So yeah, as I've mentioned, most of my friends aren't technical. This was a few years ago, but I remember being I think I was getting the train, go to see my parents, randomly scrolling on Instagram stories. I see a friend of a friend, and she had gone to work at her like uncle's fashion startup or something, and her background was like marketing. I don't even think she was social media, but anyway, just marketing. And she had posted a picture of some basic HTML, a little bit of JavaScript, and she had put coding is hard, but the thing was, she was doing it in Microsoft Word. And I literally was like, oh my God, I had to pause it. And I was like, are you literally trying to edit HTML and stuff in Microsoft Word? And obviously, okay, I know there's Notepad, that's like a beginner, but it was literally just normal Word. So I then messaged her and be like, hey, how's it going? Anyway, I can tell, there's these things called IDs, because she was like, yeah, it's so hard. Like if I forget a colon, like a squiggly bracket or this or that. So that's a trivial example. And obviously she wasn't at all technical. But the important thing is having the right suite of tools for the job at hand. And that can extend to, having, automated builds. Hey guys, let's not use cron jobs. Why don't we try using Jenkins? Or, it can be, having, particular laptops, devices. I know Secure Code Warrior are very good. When we all went remote, they literally, asked who needs a monitor for home. To be fair, I do need a monitor, but I don't know where I'd put it because I live in a small flat. So if I need two screens, I actually HDMI with my TV. But that's another story. And when it's tools, it can sometimes tools, they don't have to be a physical tool. It can also be like stuff like, calendar management, like, I know we're a West Coast company, but let's not have our monthly, our weekly call at 11 p.m. UK time. Could we do it at 4 p.m. and then, 8 or 9 a.m. America? So it's about making sure that these teams can do the job that they need to do. And this one's quite good. The best DevSecOps teams keep it real with each other. As we've all gone virtual, some of us have stopped going virtual. I have been on calls recently where people are in offices, but I know at least, for example, Secure Code Warrior, we're mainly still virtual. And what I'm really seeing is a rise in things like Slack or in Teams, or just having these informal communication channels, because, you don't always need an hour or a half-hour meeting about, let's talk about this and kind of the agenda and everything. Sometimes it's, especially within the development and technical community, it's very much, just a 2-second Slack, especially if you're in other sides of the world, an asynchronous conversation, just keeping it real with each other, being honest, like, hey, do we have timelines for this? Oh, this has gone bad. Can you help? Oh, I don't know why production is down. Maybe I should look into that. And it's about, obviously, having respect and, communication with each other, no finger pointing, really kind of bringing, say, security, to the front of mind in a positive way. So you can really There are lots of great ways to do this, but like with some of my other points, it is really about the culture. So let's look at developers for a second. And I can say, like I said, because I was one, maybe I knew I was different as a child because I had a PlayStation 1 and my majority of my memories of my childhood are playing video games. And I think some of my friends had N64, we all played Mario Kart, but literally video games were a big part of my childhood. And hey, now I'm an ex-developer. But anyway. So what's important, online, having things that are accessible. I remember when this was a long time ago, but doing my driving test, my mum got me a book and then I found a online app that was just, the security test questions. So having something online, especially in the modern world, means it's accessible everywhere. Like I personally try to move away from notebooks as much as possible because they don't scale and then also it's not shareable. So I make all my notes online and then I store them like in CRM or wherever they need to be. But having that online makes it, accessible, scalable, and especially for developers, it means they can access it whenever, wherever. I've worked in a lot of different teams. I'm not going to say their sleeping cycle is ideal, but, I've been on Slack calls with people at their time, 1 or 2 a.m. trying to debug Python errors, because obviously they need to fix it and because they want to fix it as well. Hands-on. So I've worked in quite a few teams. In my last company, we did some stuff around different styles of learning, and it was quite interesting. I've always been very interested in, say, like kinesthetic, which is learning by doing. You have visual, which is what you see, and it's kind of 2 types: visual verbal, which is reading, and visual non-verbal, which is colors and pictures, which you'll notice in my slides, lots of colors and pictures. And there's also audio, which is listening. And I was quite surprised in my last team, global solutions architects, I think of like 16, I think 13 or 14 were kinesthetic, so the hands-on style, learning by doing, let's try it, let's break it. I'm visual and audio, like I like seeing and listening, and then one guy was a reader, but literally we were outnumbered. And that's, obviously everyone is different and people learn differently, but, hands-on is a really good way to get developers to kind of interact and learn things. Gamified, I think I've already mentioned my my video gaming past, but there's also the neuroscience around it. It releases dopamine. Dopamine makes us happy. Let's have points. Let's have challenges. For me at least, I do a lot of Duolingo. I've actually gone a bit crazy with it recently. Like on the heatwave, I just added loads more languages to it. That's a different story. But part of the thing for me is because I've got this XP, and then I've got, there's this tournament feature, so I'm competing with people globally, and I need to get a minimum. Anyway, they've totally made it addictive. But as a bonus, I'm learning extra languages. I'm going on holiday to Portugal tomorrow, so I've been learning Portugal for the last 3 weeks. So having this gamified approach is so much better than if I were to just pick up, a Portuguese dictionary and then just learn random words. And insights and data, and this can be really, really insightful because it can be good to see what your strengths and weaknesses are. Because you can do an action activity, and say if we're going to look at security, like I might cover the whole OWASP top 10, like I'm going to do like 5 challenges in each. But then actually, if no one tells me the percentage or what I'm getting right or wrong, I could just be doing it blindly. Whilst after after doing all my challenges and completing it and then seeing, I'm like, oh, I'm really, really good at cross-site scripting. Awesome. But my XXE isn't doing so good, and I might think, okay, we're not doing XXE here anyway, like we've moved on, we're doing more like kind of JSON, but my authentication was a bit shaky, and I know that's a very big deal because can't be letting just anyone into the platform. So having that introspective knowledge can really help to modify behavior, and especially developers, if they know that they're good or bad or something, that definitely that will modify what they do. And that's another thing, self-paced. As I mentioned before, developers, we have kind of strange working hours sometimes. I know at least when I was, a long time ago, but when I was in school, my most productive time for revision was 7 p.m. till 11 p.m. when I was about 15, 16. But anyway, that was when I just managed to get some really good notes done. And that's the thing. Sometimes, people's circadian rhythm or what they want to do, giving them the independence and the autonomy to have self-paced, to do what they want to do, when they want to do it, how they want to do it, people are going to be more engaged than if it's going to say, you will do this, then, and in that way. So you can obviously, it has to be a bit of a medium in terms of you can't go full, let people do exactly what they want. You can kind of guide them or give them coaching. Like, hey, you're a front-end developer. Let's focus on some front-end vulnerabilities. Or, oh, you interact a lot with the, all of our infrastructure as code. Maybe let's focus on some security misconfiguration. But giving developers the ability to be self-paced is, so awesome and so effective at helping them, retain and absorb knowledge. And finally, tailored. So, like I said, if I was going to do security training and I was just going to focus on the, let's say the mobile top 10, because I had predominantly Swift developers in the room, but then 1/3 of the room were Python Django or maybe Kubernetes, part of the DevSecOps teams, they're going to be bored because maybe they have a bit of an interest in the mobile top 10, and yeah, I guess some of it's transferable. But wouldn't it be better we give the Kotlin developers or the Swift developers the mobile content? We give the infrastructure as code, we give them relevant to them. Python, I've got some Django, some Flask. Hey, let's give each of you, the content that's relevant and tailored to you. And having this kind of combination of, understanding developers, trying to figure out what makes them tick, and then giving them content in this, style of format, is really effective for this, and especially with the importance of security kind of in the modern world. It's so cliche. There's not a day goes past that I don't hear of a new hack, but it is so important that we focus on this and it ultimately speak to developers in their way. So, just a conclusion. Like I said, if you have had any questions or if you have any more, feel free to add them now. In terms of my conclusion, hopefully you've learned something. Well, you've learned about whoami and some of my disastrous friendship group decisions about Microsoft Word and development, but a little bit of a history lesson between the different methodologies, talking a lot about DevSecOps, especially security and why security-aware developers are the future, and finally a tactical guide with tips and also how to build for developers. So anyway, I hope you've all enjoyed it, and now I will take any questions if any have appeared as we've been talking.
Thank you, Stefania. That was awesome. We have got a couple of questions that have come through. Bear with me 1 second. So first one up, how do you make a secure and flexible software development lifecycle around legacy systems?
Oh, it's a tough one, isn't it? Legacy systems. So actually, I can probably talk a little bit about Secure Code Warrior now. We actually have training for COBOL. We did actually get, freelanced, hired an ex-COBOL developer to help us with it, because the stats around COBOL are crazy in terms of how much of either say flight booking or banking or being paid or anything, so much transactions underpin. And I think especially the modern generation, until I learned about this a few years ago, we just take it for granted. We think everything's in new and shiny Java and Python. But yeah, with the legacy systems, normally you're going to have a mix. Sometimes you have pure silos. You have the newer developers that don't even want to talk about legacy. But I think it's about, I'd have to click back a lot. But if you go to say the DevSecOps kind of slides, I can share my slides, but where it had all the different stages, it would be taking these legacy systems and seeing where it applies. For example, your legacy systems, at any point do you need to compile the code? Is there a build stage? What testing, if any, could be run? I'm sure there is probably some out there. Are we doing code reviews? Do we have enough developers that understand the legacy systems? Some organizations I speak to, want to, it's a bit of a horrible process, but they want to upgrade their legacy systems. And I think that is a good idea. But it's about taking the methodologies kind of what I've mentioned, having security at every stage and then relaying it on the legacy system, because although a lot of it may seem different, there are definitely some common common themes that can be applied, like, you know, starting left, training on the software language, seeing the way that it's built and compiled. Are we monitoring it in production? Do we have an incident response team that understands the system? So I think, although, you know, it is traditionally legacy, there are some, you know, transferable from the DevSecOps space.
Excellent. A few more actually. One come through on actually the Zoom webinar chat rather than the Q&A. But what security training certificates or courses do you recommend?
Sure. So there's a couple. So we have Secure Code Warrior. My company does, it's a gamified security training platform. Hey, a bit of self thing. If you go on our website, you can even try it out. We do like free web trials. And we can kind of offer certificates. So some of our, you know, some of our customers, they literally put it on LinkedIn and they have it as part of their, you know, progression. Say, for example, I need to do my OWASP top 10 cert in order to become a senior developer or a security solutions, security software engineer. So there are, you know, Secure Code Warrior, we do a couple. In terms of what's out there in the market, it's something that we talk about internally quite a lot, because there isn't really any, there's a lot of stuff for security. So I was doing, for example, certificate of ethical hacking, which isn't, that's more like, you know, it's ethical hacking. It's how to hack rather than how to protect. And there are, for example, stuff like, I was looking for a while at CISP, C-I-S-S-P. Don't ask me what it stands for, but I've heard it is you literally have a book, or it's probably online now, about this thick. I think I've got my camera on, but anyway, very thick, and each page is a type of security thing, and you can learn that. But unfortunately, these are more geared towards security. And like I said, the different language and the silos. So if you are interested and you do want to try it out, feel free. I think, do I have another slide? Oh yeah, how convenient. Feel free to go on the website. Obviously, pop me an email. I've got Twitter, LinkedIn. But I think there will be official certificates soon. But I think for the moment we have our own, and I think we might be releasing one. Who knows? I would say, hashtag watch this space.
Excellent. And another one on this on the Zoom webinar chat. What suite of tools do you use regularly, or ones that everyone should know, e.g., Metasploit and Kali?
Sure. So those ones like Metasploit are for, say if you are hacking. So I've always been more focused on the, how to write, say you've got two sides, you've got it's almost like a pie, or two sides of a donut or anything like that. You can figure out how to hack the code. So there's a lot of, say white hat hacking, using tools like, I think there's Burp Suite, Metasploit. And that's good for, say, if you want to do bug bounty programs, which are awesome. Especially, I did a talk to some teenagers last week, and I literally said, if you're interested in security, and they'd had used the Secure Code Warrior for 2 weeks in a part of a summer camp. But I was like, guys, check out the bug bounties, because if I knew these existed when I was 17, I would have been there every weekend trying to earn literally tens of thousands of dollars. But anyway, the tools you've listed, so those are more on the, at least the way I see it, ethical hacking. In terms of the tools I use, I've always been more focused in the application security testing. So whether that's SAST or also software composition analysis, because, hey, I've written my code what's wrong with it? But then as my career progressed and I kind of thought more about it, hey, let's shift left. Why don't we learn to write secure code? So a bit like what you mentioned, Metasploit, Burp Suite, etc. That's, teaching you how to hack. Let's teach you how to defend. So in terms of, day-to-day tools, I'm a big fan of the traditional. Any JetBrains IDE is usually fairly good. So whether that's, in my case, PyCharm or also IntelliJ. It also depends on what languages you code. So for example, Azure DevOps, if you're a Microsoft user, say for example C#, Jenkins has a lot of different plugins. Usually a lot of these AppSec testing tools can integrate with that. So I would say in terms of the tools, looking at the DevOps space, kind of the main players, but there are rising, as we shift more and more left, we'll kind of starting left as well. I hope that kind of helps. I kind of answered your question, but not fully, but hopefully you've got some value from what I said.
Excellent. And another one here with, so developers are often hard up against it in terms of deadlines. So how can you encourage them to take time out for security training?
100%. I know exactly what you mean. Not music to my ears because it's not music, but what you said has resonated with me very much. It depends. Okay, I'm not going to ask who you are, put you on the spot. Are you a developer? Are you a manager? Do you have any influence? But in my last company that I worked in, they were really, really good. They had every other Thursday, you had either half, I think I had half, but some people had a whole day. We called it improvement day. So if you think about it, it's actually 10% of their time was towards improving. And that could be, hey, it was basically about innovation. So it's like, I'm going to explore, maybe what would happen if we mix this product with that one? Or I'm going to teach myself about, Helm charts. Or obviously the improvement had to be slightly beneficial for the company at large. But you had a lot of free scope, and it was quite good because you'd say what you wanted to do, a few days before. There was like a list. And then, it was usually a Thursday. So on the Friday, you might do a 3-minute video of what you did. So it was very, very community building. And I'm not saying, I don't think every single organization will be able to, chop out 10% of developer time. But it's about maybe having these okay times. Like, I get it, deadlines, features, etc. But it's kind of like a reverse, not reverse, like an oxymoron. It's a bit like the whole, people didn't want cars. They wanted faster horses. And it's a bit like, okay, we have no time for security training because we're spending all our time fixing bugs. And it reminded me as well, there was something to do with mindfulness, like the kind of Zen meditation. I'm kind of into that a bit. But it was like, do 10 minutes a day. And someone's like, I don't have 10 minutes to do it. I'm like, in which case you need to do 20 minutes a day. But I think that's it. It's kind of about the culture piece. And, I get what the deadlines are like. But even just blocking out, I don't know, a Thursday, 3 to 5, it's okay to do training, or, maybe a Friday lunchtime, even if it's just, a long lunch once a month, even that just little chunk, making it okay. Because I think what happens as well, and I see this a lot in my job, is you've got your security and, Secure Code Warrior, we're predominantly selling to security. Developers are the one using our tools, and then you have engineering managers in the middle because they don't want developers, they only want developers developing. So it's about having the transparency, the openness, breaking down the silos, and then making it okay for developers to invest a little bit of time in themselves, especially, we keep getting pen tests. Every 6 months, our pen tests are failing cross-site scripting. So like, how about we have a lunch and learn on cross-site scripting vulnerabilities, and less fails. So I think blocking out time based on data, like the cross-site scripting example I mentioned, that can be a really effective way to carve out some time for developers to self-invest in security.
Perfect. And final question at the moment, where would be the best place to start with our security program, our code security program, sorry?
Oh, I was like, hey, give me a call. You've got my details on the right. I don't actually know my phone number, but anyway. Security maturity really varies in an organization. And it's the same thing can be said for like DevOps maturity. I'll speak to companies that have full CI/CD and they're all automated and everything is, click and then boom. And then I'll speak to other companies and they're like, yeah, we're thinking of getting Jenkins, which, I know most companies is like, yeah, we're using cron. Actually, that's the little secret. When I was working in Python, it wasn't actually in the UK, but we used RabbitMQ. It was a messaging system, but it was based on cron jobs. So when I came back to the UK, I was like, oh, Jenkins, this is pretty cool. But anyway, so every organization is different. And just like what I described with software development, the security program is different as well. It can be different. So there are some really great free tools out there. And honestly, if you're, I don't know if I'm talking to any CISOs on the call, but if you are one of the people, maybe a security champion, engineering manager, or a senior developer, and you just have an interest, OWASP do some great tools. So there's, for example, I know from my last company, OWASP Dep Check. So that's checking your open source components, which tend to make up about 80 to 90% of an app anyway. You've got loads of other OWASP ones. I think the OWASP Zap, I think, is the equivalent of like the Metasploit kind of burp suite. So I'm not gonna, hey, I work for a commercial organization, but I'm gonna say, try the free stuff to see what works for you. And ultimately, I think shifting left is the most effective way in terms of cost to fix a bug. Because you could start at the right, you know, incident response team, and yeah, that's good, that's important, but why not, you know, okay, why don't we fix the bugs in the CI, like fix it in Jenkins or Azure jobs? Okay, that's good, but still not addressing the root cause, which is ultimately it's the developers' secure coding knowledge. Because if they were coding securely, then we wouldn't have any bugs in the system. I didn't mention it in the talk, but I know Gene Kim is very big on, you know, don't pass defects downstream. My ex-CEO used to talk about tributaries, so like mini rivers and reservoirs. If you've got polluted tributaries, you're going to have a polluted reservoir. So why not fix the oh God, I can't even say it. I'm just going to say mini rivers. So probably the best thing, have a quick Google, try out the free tools. If you've got budget, obviously come speak to me at Secure Code Warrior. We do actually have a free trial of Secure Code Warrior. So if you guys want to try the web trial, you can literally go on our website, try a few challenges. They need to take a few minutes. But I'd say do some research first and then create a business case to whoever is important, you know, whether someone in security, you know, start having conversations, see what they're doing, see if you can help, start the Security Champions program, do a rain check, see if developers care, you know, see what your pen tests or your you know, well, you said starting a security program, but see if, you know, have you been breached before, or have there been any security incidents, you know, and how can you fix? Because as I said before, it's very much it's everyone's responsibility and it's collaborative. And if you're proactive and you want to start this, or you've got an interest, or anything I've spoken about today has sunk in, you know, making a movement of it in your organization can, you know, little ripples can all of a sudden make a big difference when you're starting your security program.
Perfect. Well, I think that's it then. Yeah. Thanks everyone for attending and for the questions. Stefania, thank you very much for your time and your presentation. That was awesome. And yeah, if you require any questions from Stefania, as you say, please get in touch with her, or you can come through us and we will put you in touch. We have a number of other webinars coming up over the coming weeks, so please keep an eye on the Bernd Sheehan LinkedIn page. And of course, we will be going out with more details on these in the coming weeks. So thanks very much.
Perfect. Thank you so much.